You're sitting in a meeting. Everything feels normal. Then suddenly, your boss turns to you and says something very casually but heavy enough to freeze the room for a second. I feel like you haven't been very proactive lately. No yelling, no harsh tone, just a vague comment. And yet, in that exact moment, something drops in your chest. Your mind starts racing. Not proactive how? I worked overtime last week. I'm not lazy. He must be misunderstanding something. Almost instinctively, you open your mouth. No, that's not really the case because last week I had to handle some urgent tasks and I already sent the reports by email. Your voice speeds up. You start listing things. You explain. You try to prove that you're not the person implied by that comment. Everyone looks at you, your boss nods and moves on. The meeting continues. But from that moment on, you feel like you've lost something subtle, even though no one said you were wrong. Here's the problem. The moment you started explaining, you unconsciously stepped into a familiar role, the role of someone being reviewed, someone being evaluated. You were no longer standing on equal ground. You placed yourself in the position of having to prove, clarify, and be understood. And in power dynamics, the person who needs to be understood is always in the lower position. What's ironic is that we do this every single day without realizing it. When someone hints at something, we defend ourselves. When someone doubts us, we explain. When someone labels us, we rush to prove that we're not like that. We think we're protecting ourselves, but in reality, we're handing over the authority to define who we are. The uncomfortable truth is this: the world doesn't judge you based on right or wrong. It judges you based on who controls the frame through influence and reasoning. And the moment you go into defense mode, you step into their frame. From that point on, everything you say sounds like justification, no matter how logical you are. This video isn't about winning arguments. It's about choosing a different path, a path where you don't need to argue to stay on top. If you're still watching at this point, leave a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Not as a check-in, but as a signal that you're here, that you're listening, and that you're joining a group of people who understand that real power doesn't come from words, but from inner stability. Let's begin. If you look closely, the urge to explain yourself didn't appear by accident. It was planted in you very early, long before you were old enough to understand what you were learning. As a child, whenever you were suspected or blamed by adults, the only way out was explanation. You had to say you didn't mean it, retell the story, prove you were a good kid in order to be spared. Repeated often enough, your brain learns something simple but dangerous. The one asking questions holds the power, and you are only safe when you explain enough. The problem is, you grew up, but that pattern never left. Deep down, whenever someone questions you, criticizes you, or labels you, your mind instantly replays the old script. The other person becomes the authority figure, and you return to the role of the child trying to prove innocence. You don't realize that you're no longer in a classroom, but your body and instincts still behave as if you are. That's why every time you rush to justify yourself, you're not just explaining a situation, you're unconsciously returning to a familiar identity, the person who needs approval, understanding, and reassurance to feel safe. And in psychological power dynamics, nothing weakens you faster than placing yourself there. From this point on, everything changes when you do something deeply counterintuitive. Nothing at all. No rebuttal, no explanation, no attempt to make the story sound reasonable in someone else's eyes. You simply stay still, keep steady eye contact, and allow silence to exist. This isn't silence because you have nothing to say. It's deliberate silence, the silence of someone who refuses the role of the accused from the beginning. The moment you stop defending, a psychological vacuum forms. Humans are deeply uncomfortable with that vacuum because they're used to throwing something out and waiting for a reaction, used to maintaining control by forcing the other person to respond. When you don't react the way they expect, the familiar rhythm of the interaction breaks, and that break unsettles them. This is where something interesting happens. You don't need to do anything else to flip the situation because silence itself becomes the new power frame. People fear not knowing where they stand in a relationship, and when you refuse to play the role of the one being judged, the entire hidden structure of the interaction collapses. No defendant means no judge. No one needing to explain means the accusation loses its footing. Very often, the other person can't tolerate this feeling for long. They start talking more, softening their original statement, clarifying what they really meant, sometimes even explaining themselves. While you haven't justified anything, they begin doing that work for you. And in that moment, power quietly changes hands. Not through argument or victory, but through your refusal to step into the role they expected you to play. This is when you begin to understand that silence isn't weakness. You just haven't been taught how to see it correctly. Silence isn't giving up. It's refusing the rules of the game from the start. Silence isn't letting others dominate you. It's allowing their discomfort to surface when no one reacts according to the old script. And once you see this clearly, you stop viewing not defending yourself as a lack and start seeing it as a deliberate choice made by someone who understands the terrain. Life, of course, doesn't always allow silence. There are moments where saying nothing creates tension, or where silence might be mistaken for avoidance. The real question is this: when you do speak, are you speaking from habit or from position? Most people react to verbal attacks by pushing back immediately. They argue, prove, counter, and unknowingly keep the conflict alive. That style of speaking doesn't elevate you, it pulls you deeper into opposition. The alternative isn't pushing back, but absorbing the force. Instead of blocking the blow, you let it pass and redirect it until the other person loses balance. When someone accuses you emotionally, denying it too quickly gives their accusation more weight. But when you agree in a way they didn't anticipate, the energy they threw out suddenly has nowhere to land. You're not agreeing to diminish yourself, you're agreeing in a way that exposes the exaggeration in their words. Sometimes a touch of exaggeration or light irony is enough to defuse tension. When someone deliberately escalates an issue to provoke you, treating it as something not worth emotional investment shows clearly that you're untouched. No need for loud sarcasm or sharp mockery, just a calm, slightly amused tone that communicates you don't see their attack as something capable of defining you. The most important thing here isn't language, but energy. The quiet certainty that you're still standing, still grounded, and not being pulled into their emotional storm. Once you hold that state, the next shift happens naturally. You change roles. Instead of being the one questioned, the one answering, you step back and become the observer. This doesn't require aggressive interrogation. Sometimes a simple question is enough to redirect the entire exchange. When you respond to a question with another question, you're not avoiding it. You're refusing to stand inside the frame that was built for you. The moment attention moves away from your behavior and onto the other person's reaction, power shifts immediately. The conversation stops being about whether you're right or wrong and starts revealing why they're reacting so strongly, why they need that tone, and what's actually bothering them. You no longer need to defend yourself because you're no longer the center of judgment. You're watching an emotional state unfold. At this level, you realize something important. Most attacks aren't really about what you did. They come from unresolved emotions in the other person. When those emotions are exposed, even silently, the game changes. You're no longer arguing facts, you're seeing the bigger picture. There's also a deeper form of maturity that appears here, agreeing selectively. You can acknowledge a specific action without accepting a character label. Owning a mistake is a sign of inner strength. Allowing that mistake to define who you are is what weakens you. When you calmly admit something didn't go well without defending your identity, you send a clear signal that your value isn't fragile. That calmness doesn't come from communication tricks, it comes from internal safety. Only people who are truly grounded can admit imperfection without shaking, because they aren't afraid of being seen as flawed. And that lack of fear makes every attempt to diminish them feel empty.
If you reflect honestly, you'll notice that not every insult hurts. Only the ones that touch a doubt you already carry inside do. When someone says something completely false about you, you might even laugh. But when they say something partially true that you haven't fully faced yet, the urge to explain kicks in immediately. That's why you only defend yourself when you're not settled inside. When they hit something real, it hurts. When they name a hidden fear, you panic. And there are many people who are very good at sensing exactly what you're trying to hide, because strong reactions reveal everything. But once you're honest enough to face your own shadow, once you accept that you're imperfect, that you have selfish, weak, or uncomfortable parts, those arrows stop flying. No one can use what you've already owned to attack you. No one can shame you for something you no longer deny. At that level, you don't need defense because there's nothing exposed for others to grab onto. From here, I want you to try something simple but not easy. For the next 7 days, play a small game with yourself. The game is called No Defense. Whenever you're questioned, misunderstood, hinted at, or labeled, pause before you speak. Don't explain, don't justify, don't try to be easily understood. If you made a mistake, own the action and stop there. If you're misunderstood, allow it to exist. During those 7 days, don't try to change anyone, just observe. Watch people's eyes when you stop reacting the way they expect. Watch the confusion, the hesitation, even the quiet respect that begins to appear. And watch yourself. Notice how it feels to stand without explanation compared to constantly proving who you are. What I want you to take from this isn't silence as a tactic or clever phrases to handle people. It's a deeper shift. From someone who needs to prove their worth to someone who doesn't need justification to exist. Real power doesn't come from being acknowledged. It comes from being stable even without acknowledgement. The most dangerous person in any dynamic isn't the one who talks the most, but the one who doesn't need to be understood in order to stand firmly as themselves. If this felt familiar, it might be because you're tired of explaining yourself to the world. If this content resonated, leave a comment 1 below so I know you're here. And if you want more videos about power psychology, communication, and maintaining the upper hand in relationships, comment yes. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what's coming next. And if you know someone who's constantly defending themselves and losing ground in conversations, share this video with them. They might need it more than you think. I'll see you in the next video.